Hello, I've skipped my introduction today because I've come straight in to be with Jenni Rock. And Jenni thank you so much, Jenni, because Jenni often appears on our monthly meetups for members of the Secret Divorce Group and gives so much value, so much so that I often wish we were live broadcasting those discussions. So it's really great. Thank you so much for making time to come and have a chat and a catch up. Some of the things we're going to focus on are quite difficult subjects, but I don't think there's anything that anyone needs trigger warnings for. But let's start with talking about diving right into some of the clients that you are working with. Quite often now they are men. They are dealing with incredibly difficult, stressful situations. Perhaps you could share with us an example of what that means in real life. What's happening to these men, and there's maybe somebody already knows that's going through this, but they probably won't know because they're not talking about it to their friends that much, are they? They're just dealing with it.
No, absolutely. And there seems to be this kind of macho generic attitude of can't show weakness, can't admit what's going on, don't want to talk about it, just kind of hide away from the reality, really. And then it all comes crashing down around them because hiding away from it doesn't work anymore. And then they have to face reality.
And what does that reality look like? Because it's not that everyone's individual, they have different circumstances, but there's some very common themes, aren't there, that you're noticing, and I've certainly been noticing too.
No, absolutely. There are common themes around allegations being made against them that are, um, t- according to the person, untrue and false allegations. Obviously, the only people that know are the two people that were involved at the time, but we have to work on you know, the client that we're working with if we
I
perceive them to be
I
genuine.
think I think it's fair to say that in quite often in these cases there is zero evidence to back up
Hmm.
any of these claims, which is why
Yeah.
it's not always that difficult to assume that they are, not fantasizing about these horrible things that are happening to them.
No, absolutely. And it's very easy once that allegation has been made to then hide behind it. So any of us can go along at any point and say, they did this to me. And then the other person goes and gets arrested. They have that stain on their record, if you like, that they've been arrested, they've been cautioned. And then it can take months or even years to look into these allegations. And in the meantime, social services get involved. They insist on supervised access to the children. So these parents are going from spending, sort of 24/7 with these kids to maybe once a fortnight, for a couple of hours.
Mm.
And they can only see them in a contact center where it's supervised and it's all recorded. And, I understand why social services place these restrictions because there are too many cases of children being let down by the system that end up, unfortunately, losing their lives in terribly awful, traumatic circumstances. But that's not what these cases are about. These cases generally are not about child abuse or even alleged child abuse. They're alleged incidents between two parents,
Mm.
which are not normally backed up by any kind of evidence. So parents are being deprived of their ability to see their children, and it's being used as a tactic by the person that's actually reporting the allegation in a lot of cases. And what that does is it actually works against the people that are genuinely
Yes.
being mistreated because they're then not taken seriously.
Mm.
So it really dilutes the amount of police time, the amount of investigation time for people chasing around trying to sort of prove or deny false allegations when they could be focusing on the people that really are going through these awful things. And it's a very convenient tactic to be able to use because it's almost like, oh, you say that and you know, everything then stops and grinds to a halt because this person is suddenly being pictured as a monster, you know?
And I share your fear that these sometimes dads, quite often mothers, who are making up lies, quite frankly, and using this as a way to often bully and coerce and try to get some control over the situation, and putting the other parent through absolute hell, and are fearful. Yeah, it's horrible to be accused of these dreadful things, especially if you've never done them. But as you say, it totally makes it so hard for those who are genuinely in these difficult situations, because I always say to people, how does the judge know when you go in to the court? How do they know? Which is why I'm always suggesting they take copious records, start doing a co-parenting online diary, and plan and a diary. Even if the other parent won't participate, use it to log. This is what happened then, and just have all these details, because it's harder for someone to make up horrible things about you if you've kept a lot of data and can evidence things. Not that you should have to be, really, because you think they should be the one with the proof. But say a little bit about let's not get too sidetracked, because your own experience was pretty extreme. But I think it is pertinent to ask you a little bit about how you feel the family law system deals with who says what and who's to be believed and who's not.
I think the burden of proof at the moment seems to be how do I prove I'm not guilty, as versus how do I prove that they are guilty. So instead of being impartial, and expecting evidence on both sides, there is very much a bias towards, oh, you have to prove your innocence. Well, how can you do that if you're sat in a flat on your own, minding your own business? Or, you've just hung up the phone because you've just had a phone call about, can I have the kids' swimming costumes for next weekend because we're going swimming? And, it's not recorded. There is evidence that a phone call's been made, but it's abused so much, and it makes me cross because of the impact it's having on the victim and the children, because the children are being deprived of the other parent unnecessarily, which is traumatic for the child. The adult is being traumatized by being, basically out on bail under allegations, or they have to keep going down to the police station. I had one client phone me up saying, "The police phone me. I've got to go and see the police station." And I'm like, "It's okay. Breathe. Just breathe. There is nothing. You haven't done anything. Don't panic." But it's almost like when you're driving along and you see a police car, you automatically brake because that kind of guilt kicks in, thinking, "Oh God, I hope I'm not speeding." But most of us law-abiding people tend to have that reaction when we see anybody in authority, and it's really difficult. I find it very difficult to comprehend the minds of these people that are doing this, because it's just not right. It's
bullying, isn't it?
It's bullying. Yes.
And I know a mother who her ex decided to accuse her of doing some violent act at home, and she was literally spent the night in a cell, and then she got out the next day, and she hadn't done anything. She's a tiny little thing. She really hadn't done anything. And of course, you're often dealing with mental health issues as well, mixed into this. But there's no consequences, are there? So I think this must be so difficult for particularly the dads. They're being stopped from seeing their children. They're being labelled as awful person, even though in many cases they are completely innocent. And yet, when the truth comes out, as it were, and charges are dropped and everything, nothing happens. Nobody says to the mother or that other parent, "Oh, that was naughty." It's like there's no consequences. And I know I can't believe that any lawyer, self-respecting lawyer, would ever suggest that somebody takes that approach as a way to basically bully, coerce, and get the result they want. But I do wonder sometimes that well-meaning advice could be misinterpreted. So by saying to a parent, does this happen? Does that happen? It might be just general questions, but if it's added to that, because if that happens, you can get legal aid, and if he's abusive, then you don't need him to have to come home to the house, and you kind of get it all to yourself while you go through the divorce. They may be simply stating facts, but unfortunately, the way the system is set up, it's inevitable that this is going to happen.
It kind of feels like that this group of people get taken into this separate classroom at school, and they get taught this whole playbook. And the rest of us are blindly oblivious to this complete playbook until it starts getting used against them. And they are almost textbook, in terms of the claims. And it's, they don't even have to be recent claims. It can be like, 20 years ago we had an argument and they threw something at my head, and they'll claim that as abuse. And it's like, hang on a minute. That was when you were throwing chairs at them. You were both as bad as one another. Why are you bringing this up now? Because that's completely irrelevant to now,
And what's so particularly sad is this concept of relevance. I had someone ask me this evening, does it make any difference if the reason that we're getting divorced is because my soon-to-be ex is having affairs, or just completely effectively left the marriage, and I said no difference at all. Nobody cares, at least of all the court. They don't care. They just want to know how you're going to split the finances and move on, and who's going to look after the children. But do you think that sometimes people get muddled with the idea that by making out the other parent to be this awful person, it's not just about controlling and keeping them away from the children, but do you think there is a sense of, maybe I'll end up with more money because of that? There's a mix-up between the two, the financial side and the children's side, which has really got quite a hard line between it, but I think a lot of people don't always realise that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know that an awful lot of it is done out of anger, because they're angry. They're angry that this person has just suddenly imploded their lives. They're angry that this person doesn't want to be with them anymore, and they feel like they have to punish the other person. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of aggression, a lot of anger, a lot of I'm going to punish you because you made me sad type of attitude. You don't deserve to see the children because you did X, Y, Z. Mm. You decided to have a fling, therefore you chose to walk away from our children as well as me. And they put themselves into that same kind of category as the children. But the children are not in that same category. The children love both parents. They didn't ask to be in the middle. They didn't choose to be in the middle. And quite often with the dads that I work with, I'm saying to them, you don't get to give up. It's not an option. And the reason that you don't get to give up is because your children can't fight for themselves to spend time with you. You have to fight not only for you, but for them as well. So you have to carry that load. And part of, that's a lot of the work that I do with them is basically on getting them strength, to get that internal strength that they're going to need, and that resilience and that perseverance to fight that journey.
And it does take a lot of strength and perseverance. And maybe it's an added complication when it's the soon-to-be ex is behaving horribly and lying, and actually they're the one who totally trust the relationship, and maybe they're acting out of guilt, but whatever's motivating them, it's very hefty. But I often see in those cases for the dads, it's even more bewildering. It's like, but she had the affair, she wanted to leave, and now she's trying to cut me out of my children, and that's the kind of a really extreme form of bullying. And bullying it is, and I think it's good. good to say. I mean, it's not necessarily that you're dealing with a narcissistic personality or a bully, but what percentage would you say with the cases that you work with where that is actually the case?
Where they've got false allegations being made against.
Yeah,
Probably about 95%.
yeah, that's quite high.
So yeah, absolutely. And quite often it's done as an attempt to project the blame away from them. So they don't want to have, it's easier to blame somebody else for everything going wrong in their life than it is to actually sit and take personal responsibility and to say, look, we both had an element of not working on this marriage. We both kind of took our eye off the ball, and neither of us prioritized each other to ensure that this marriage lasted. But instead of doing that, it's easier to just go, you're a horrible person, you're nasty, you're evil, you broke up the marriage. Because it's easier. It's less uncomfortable than owning up to your own part in however the marriage ended. Because there are always reasons. And, we all have to take personal responsibility for the actions and choices that we take. Sorry, take. choose and take. There's a combination there.
and absolutely personal responsibility is always key, but sometimes do you find that say the dads in this case, they take a bit too much responsibility, and that
Yeah.
part of the way they're being controlled and bullied is because their own guilt and insecurity is being triggered, and they're not able to step back and go, I've talked, I'm sure you have, people where they are say, well, it's my fault and I had the affair, and I'm going, look, no one's here to judge you. At the end of the day, your marriage is over. Your job now is to work out how best to sort this out and make the best co-parenting relationship you can for your children. And whoever did what to whom is actually quite irrelevant. And they're often quite astounded by that, but it's just not useful. People do what they do. But your job is to look forwards and go, how can we do this the best way for our children? But that's tricky when you've got someone lying about you and deliberately trying to stop you see the children.
It is, and quite often they take it very, very much to heart, and they start to believe that they have become some kind of monster, and then they can't see a way out, and then they start to think, well, everybody's better off if I'm just not around them, and then they start to make really bad decisions in terms of, I'll try and end my life because that way everybody's going to be happy and they don't have to deal with me. And, nobody needs me anyway, forgetting the fact that their children need them.
Yes.
And, I've worked with a number of dads who have actually either attempted suicide and suddenly seen sense right at the last moment, or they have gone out and bought all of the equipment that they needed to attempt suicide that day. And, I've managed to get to them just in time so that they don't actually follow through with it. But it's kind of, they feel worthless, and they feel like they have no purpose. They feel like nobody loves them, nobody wants them. They're just a burden to everybody, and there's no point in going on. And it's terrible, the mental health struggles that some of these men are going through no fault of their own.
And how do they talk about it with anyone? Because the minute you go, well, my ex says I've done this and I've done that, then they have to add, it's not true. I mean, they always add that, and I'm always thinking, bless them, because of they shouldn't even have to say that. Of course, but how do you have that conversation or share it? It's very difficult.
It is very difficult. There's a lot of pride and ego that men don't want to show any form of weakness, and normally by the time I get to them, they've kind of had a bit of a breakdown, and at that point they're more willing to discuss what's happened. But my focus isn't on what you've done, it's about where do we go from here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, if somebody has got to that point where they feel that there is no point in living anymore, I get it. I was there, I was there. I know we talked about this before. I was there in that shoes. In those shoes, thinking, what's the point of me being here anymore? If this is what life is going to look like, I don't want to be here. But for for a man especially to actually admit that that's how bad it's got, it's a really hard thing for them to talk about. And, I'm very fortunate in that, a lot of the men that I'm working with at the moment are on a referral basis from other men who have worked with me, and they've seen the impact, they've seen the difference. And, that helps that there's a recommendation there that, oh, she's all right, you can talk to her.
Because it takes a lot of trust, and I think also we live in a society that's very particularly difficult for men to. If a man says, "Oh, I've been accused of, of abuse, physical abuse," straight away there is a potential for presumption of guilt in the person they're talking to, unless that person already knows them really well. So there isn't, I think, as you said earlier, in society and in the family court system, there doesn't seem to be an automatic presumption of innocence, which is a problem. And for me, one of the things I think is a huge problem with the family law system is it's not part of the it's separate from the rest of the legal system. So if I went into a court and I lied about something, that's perjury. But in the family court, it's civil law, so it doesn't seem to be a problem. So it's insane. Apart from the usual lack of funding and not having enough court time and judges. So the added issue, one of the huge problems, as you already pointed out, is the time all of this takes. The children are practically grown up by the time justice prevails, if it does at all, and that's the problem. So you're having to manage a state of hopefulness when most of the time it's going to look pretty hopeless.
Yeah, and one of the things that we work through is that to them this problem encompasses their entire existence. To whoever is doing the CAFCAS report or the Children's Services report or social workers report or even the judge on the day, they could be the last in a long line of cases that person's dealt with that day. They could be the first person that person speaks to after they've just had a fight at home with their other half. They could be talking to somebody who's just so hacked off with life, just not got the promotion that they wanted, or anything can be going on with these people. Because for those people that are in the system dealing with these cases, they are just one of thousands. They're one case out of thousands that they deal with, and quite often they're overworked, underpaid, stressed to high heaven, don't want to be there. And that person has the power to make or break your entire life. And that kind of gets forgotten quite a lot. That that person that's kind of making that decision about you is a person too. They're not infallible. They make mistakes. They can be biased, even though they're not supposed to be. But bias does happen. And if something's not going your way, if they make a report and it's full of inaccuracies, that doesn't mean you've got no recourse. But having the strength to actually be able to say, it's wrong. What you've written down there is not true. Sometimes is that step too much for some of these people that have been beaten down so far by the system.
And also if they don't have much money, because the assumption is, well, I must, people who've, and I'm sure you've talked to them too, who've, when they say how much they've spent on legal fees, my brain can't even hold the number. It's just incredible. And they'll never get that money back, even if it was simply to prove that they're innocent of the accusations made against them. So I think it's important for anyone who's listening not to ever use the excuse, the cost of the legal process, because there's a lot you can do self-representing, isn't there? We both know many fathers who maybe wish they'd spent less money earlier and taken that step, because you can work with people, maybe sometimes they might be an ex-family lawyer themselves, who will help them deal with a lot of the admin side if they find that too overwhelming. There's Families Need Fathers as a wonderful national charity which provides a lot of support. But ultimately, even if they and they'll sometimes need a lawyer to send a letter or counteract a court order. I'm not saying you'd never use legal services, but you can minimise them, be very precise how you use them. And obviously through Best Way to Divorce, we can help people do that. But all of that is emotionally impossible if you're in a state of hopelessness. And so you have to start with the kind of work you do, basically, which is help them see that there is a way out of this, and the focus is the children, because at the end of the day, whatever happens at some point, you always say one time, eventually they will come and say, where were you?
Absolutely, because 9 times out of 10 the children will remember some part of their dad, or some part of their mum who's vanished out of their lives, and they will get to an age where they start to question, well, this is what I was told, but this is what I remember. And those two things are very far apart from each other, So which is right? Who is telling the truth? And there is always hope. And, one of the things that I always tell them is, I can't influence or guarantee when you're going to see your kids next, or if these allegations are going to get dropped, or what the court's going to decide. But what I can do is give you the strength to get through this, whatever it takes. And that's all I can promise.
Oh, Jenni, you can do a lot more than that, because you have a brilliant bit of homework for dads, haven't you, about the communication, which
Yes.
you told me recently. Can you share that? I just think it's so clever.
Yeah, one of the things that I suggest, especially if they're not getting much or any contact with their children, is send them an email. Set up a separate email address for that child. Send them an email to that email address. Just, look, I was doing this today and I really thought of you and I wish that you were there to see it. Just, sort of, I'm still fighting for you, but I don't know when I'm going to be able to see you next. Talk to them as if you were able to talk to them. When they do come looking for you, you give them that email address and that password, because you don't open those emails in the in-between time. You leave them closed, so that when that now grown child goes into that account and sees all these emails and starts working through them, they can start seeing the other side of the picture, because all they've been given is one perspective, and that's not the whole perspective. It's just one half of the perspective. So, you've got children out there who wish that their dads would spend time with them, who pray for their parent to actually notice them, to want to be with them, to want to spend time with them. And then you've got this kind of, swathe of dads that want desperately to spend time with their kids, and they're being denied that for no good reason. And this is a way that they can actually prove to their child, I was trying, I was doing what I could, but unfortunately I didn't get the result I wanted or I was looking for. But it doesn't mean that I gave up, because giving up is not an option.
And what's particularly brilliant about that, and really worth mentioning here, is that they're able to do that, and neither in the emails nor in the explanation they give later, they don't need to diss the other parent. No matter how horrific that experience was, it's still the other half of your children. So you can't blame them, and so you just get the blame out of the way, and you focus on, you love your children, you're going to do everything you can to be with them, and you're going to document that through these emails. And so, because that's really what the children need, as you say, they need to know that they're still loved, and that the father was trying. They never gave up on them, and that's actually what really, really matters. And how do you do that in a conversation in a coffee bar with someone you barely know? And if it goes against everything the mother's ever told you, it's impossible. So I think it's a very elegant and powerful thing to do, but best not done after a couple of whiskies.
No, probably not. You don't want to go on drunken ramblings to your son or daughter who are age 3 at that time.
Exactly. And try, at least you don't have to be age appropriate. You could just talk to them as this beautiful person that you're connected to.
Yeah. And it's important. All people want is acceptance and love. You know, human beings are designed to live in a community. They're designed to, you know, biologically to live as a herd, if you like. And you know, when they don't have that standard parenting, they feel like they're sort of cut out of the herd a little bit because they're not normal. They're not, you know, everybody else has got two parents, why have I only got one? And they will have been told all kinds of things growing up. But the bottom line is that, you know, we all have a responsibility towards our children to give them the best potential chance at a good life as an adult, you know, a law abiding, contributing member of society. And we do that by being that person ourselves and leading by example. But also, when we are faced with a wall that is impossible to breach, we we lay the preparations because that wall is not going to stand forever.
Yeah.
You know, the Berlin Wall fell. You know, other walls will fall, and these walls will fall. And when you do get to see them on the other side, you want to be able to evidence it properly. So as you say, you can't cover it in an hour in a coffee bar.
No. No. And how do they, when that wall falls and they get that contact, there's the first thing is that those children who are probably possibly adults by then may not want to talk about any of this for quite some time, possibly years. I think that can come as a surprise to some dads because they're not emotionally ready for it. And there was an interview I did recently with the dad whose daughter was basically kidnapped by the mother and is in Poland, and he's getting no help at all really from the legal system because unfortunately there doesn't seem to be able to enforce the legal system to get her back again. But one of the things that really stuck with me in that interview was he talked about how effectively his daughter will to some level have been traumatized. And if you grow up being told God knows what about your father, that traumatizes you as a child. Kept away separately, in this case having to keep a low profile in Poland so that the authorities can't, inverted commas, can't find her to bring her back, because legally she is supposed to come home. And then finally, at the end of the day, finally managing to find him, because he's got posters on the internet, he's got a website, he's doing everything he can to make sure that when she's ready, at some point she will get online and she'll be able to find her dad. But his worry is that could completely re-traumatize her, discovering that truth and having to deal with it. And he feels at this stage he's gone so far, he has to make this moral decision every day: do I carry on, or do I step back and just disappear? And it's a very difficult situation for him to be in as a father.
Yeah, and I think that child is going to be traumatized every which way that you turn. I don't think that there is I don't think there is a better option. There is no better option here. She's been taken away from her parents by one of her parents. She's been taken away from a life that she knew, from her friends, from her family, from her potentially school and whatever other sort of resources that were there. And there will always be a part of her that does know that.
Yeah.
So from the age of about 3 upwards, they start to retain memories, and those memories will be there. And it will kind of be like a jigsaw with a big chunk missing. So at some point, whether it be when she's 18 or 80, she is going to want to know, what is this big chunk of my life that I'm missing? Why did we have to keep moving around so much? Why did Mum keep changing my name? All of those questions are going to come up. Maybe not even until they have children and they start to sort of live life as a parent, and then start to see the difference between their child's relationships and their relationships. And they'll start asking questions, and then the answers are not necessarily going to be happy answers. We hope that there will be a happy ending for everybody, but there often aren't. there's not always a happy ever after. There's not always a happy ending that can be given, because all kinds of things happen in this world. But we have to keep hope that no matter what, that we do our best and we give our all, and that's good enough. And when that child does eventually resurface, then we do everything within our power at that point to make that transition as easy as possible. But they probably will need support. They'll probably need some kind of therapy,
Yeah.
mental health intervention. Depends on the depth of the lies that they've been told. Who knows what's going on there?
And even though you will never get back those lost years, again, there's no point looking at that. That's not going to help anyone. But
No.
looking forwards, even if it's this particular dad said he reckons he's got another 20 years. He's hoping that within the next 20 years he at least gets to re-meet his own daughter, and just holding on to that hope. But if say he meets her in 10 years, okay, he's lost all of that time, but there she is, and she may go on and have grandchildren, and he may get to be a grandparent. Whereas if he just gave up and walked away, he'd be cutting off that as well, because it's not just
Absolutely.
this generation, it's the next generation. No, they're your children's children deserve to have grandparents. It's just not fair to cut off everybody.
And that's one of the reasons why I always say giving up is never an option. You never give up. It doesn't matter how bad the situation is. You never, ever, ever give up. Because how can you look at yourself in the mirror knowing that you've just walked away,
Yeah.
and you've given up on your children when they needed you?
And you've just got to get the support to do it, because it is a mental health issue. It's a huge issue, and this is what brings me on to conversing with someone today who said they were in a very difficult divorce. The wife was very made a lot of claims that weren't true. It was very, very stressful, and it was hit him a bit like a train. And when it happened, 2 weeks off work, boom. And this is not an uncommon story, and yet and it's a difficult area, because the workplace, they'll tick boxes. They want to have happy and healthy employees, but when it comes to such difficult personal stuff, and there's still a lot of taboos around divorce, it can be a tricky one. And I personally, as you know, feel that there is not enough support in the workplace. Just giving them a counsellor hotline. I'm sorry, counsellors do great work, but with everything we've just been talking about, it's not just about counselling, is it? It's much more proactive and complicated than that. That their needs are intricate. They need support from a wide range of people, and counselling may be one part of that, but it's certainly not going to keep them. It's not going to give them enough hope, because they need practical support and help as well, legal, financial, etc. So when it comes to the workplace, what are your thoughts on that? Because have you found that particularly working, I know you work with women as well as men, but particularly with maybe the men and the women too, with their workplace lives, have you noticed it's had an impact on them at all?
I think there tends to be almost like, if I don't talk about it, I can pretend it's not happening. So I don't talk about it at work. People don't know it's happening. We're good. I don't need any help. I don't need any support. I am absolutely fine. And that works for so long until suddenly the dam breaks. And then it's potential nervous breakdown time. It's more severe impacts on their health, because they're bottling it up so much that they're not allowing themselves to process the emotions. So, that causes all kinds of internal damage from the stress hormone that is raging around them, that's only supposed to be there very short bursts of time. It's not sustainable. So there's been a few different sort of scenarios. I've had some dads that can keep it together enough to still be able to work, barely, but they can do it. there have been some that can't work at all, that literally, they have to go sick, and then they're off sick long term because they're just not able to cope with life. And the whole range in between. So there is no one size fits all solution, and it's very much a case of every single divorce scenario is different. There's no one way that fits everybody. So from my perspective, all I can do is provide the support as best I can, whatever the circumstances are. And then we go from there. But part and parcel of that is, personal responsibility, extreme ownership, and brutal honesty. I had somebody say, oh, yeah, so that, I'm like, yeah, and you chose to marry them.
Yeah, no, I like that one. I always go, but you had beautiful children. You must have had something with them at some point.
Absolutely. And one of the beauties of working for men is that I can be really blunt with them.
Yeah.
And it's great, because I tend to use the sense of humour as a way to lighten things up sometimes, because, do you know what, if we can't laugh at ourselves, then there's something really wrong with life. But laughter is also a great way to release some of that stress.
Yeah.
And, it becomes a routine. I'm part of their week. I'm talking to them on a regular basis. If they have an emergency that pops up, they'll message me, they'll text me, they'll email me. And, it's like, yeah, but what did you expect? You knew this was on the bingo card. It was coming. You knew it was going to come at some point. We can just tick that one off now.
That's often what I enjoy the most when you join me on the Secret Divorce meetup, that we'll be chatting with one of the lovely people there, and it'll be, it's always like, we're not psychic, but it's so obvious what's going to happen next, and you're just trying to help them to see that we're not making this up. This is the kind of thing that happens, and that's bringing me to like the preventative side. So for me, quite often I'll be sending both mums and dads to you, because I've said, right, I've got you set up on the Detour Life divorce management system, and there's a template co-parenting plan, and you need to go through that and think about how you're going to co-parent. But right now you're being bullied, so your thinking is going to be fudgy, so you need to work with someone who gets that, is going to help you put together this plan. And that often seems is the last thing on their list of things to do, but I'm always encouraging them to do it early, because from a practical point of view, it might affect the financial settlement when they realise actually they're going to spend this much time with the children, so they're not going to be able to earn as much money as they thought, and so this is going to impact that on a practical basis. But also psychologically, that kind of taking ownership, because often their confidence as a co-parent has been smashed to bits, hasn't it, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. And we said before, they're a shell of the person that they can be, and it takes time to rebuild that person. And once they've rebuilt themselves, they're much stronger for it, because they face that adversity, they face that challenge, they have built their resilience, they've rebuilt their self-confidence and their self-esteem. But they have to go through the fire first, and the divorce bit is the fire. And some of them run straight into the fire and they don't check their exit routes. Some of them run straight into the fire and they have no clue who else is in the fire or what's going on. And some people run into the fire fully prepared with their breathing apparatus and they're all good to go. But,
and they're expecting. I try to set expectations when I do a session with people. But I was chatting to someone recently, and he described his soon to be ex, and I said, so basically you're bullied. And he was like, yeah. But he wouldn't have used that word before, but he acknowledged that that's clearly what was going on. And we talked about mediation, and I said, I'll introduce you to, well, maybe a couple of mediators, so you can say to her, which, I've talked to these, both of these seem good, which one would you like to use? And he said, oh, no, she said, she doesn't care which one we use, we'll just choose a mediator. And I said, this is a person, right, who likes to be in control and make decisions. I said, you might find it's just easier to go with that's how she is and give her the opportunity to make that decision. But it's a closed choice where you've decided in advance these would be good, And he was like, and I said, you've just got to learn the way that change the way you're thinking and how you approach even something that should be as simple as which mediator we use. And I imagine you have to do quite a lot of that with the co-parenting side, because what would be fine with a rational, nice person is suddenly a very, very, very different situation. So I'm talking more about where these dads who do get to see their children, but it's absolute hell to deal with the co-parenting, especially in a way that doesn't put the children in front of any conflict.
Absolutely. And when you're dealing with somebody that's extremely high conflict, one of the best ways to diffuse that is grey rock. And you just, you basically become as boring and as sort of unnoticeable as possible. You don't want to stick your head over the parapet because they're just going to take pot shots at you every single time. So if they say to you, oh, can you do this? Okay, that's it. And I was having a conversation with somebody on WhatsApp last night, one of my clients, and they were going, they've asked this, I don't know how to respond. Right, okay, this is what, this is a way that you can choose to respond if you like, or something, whatever you choose to send. And she goes, yeah, but then what if they said, I said, that's it. That's all you need to say. But what if, no. No can be a complete sentence, and no response is a response. And you know exactly who I'm talking about here. In the end, after 3 or 4 kind of go-betweens, I ended it in big capital letters, do not respond. And then I just got back, yes, ma'am.
I love that phrase, no can be a sentence. Because when you are bullied and you're always trying, and often those people who are being bullied you wouldn't know it to have a conversation with them. They don't give out I'm a bullied person persona by any means, but they are being bullied, and it's very they're so defensive, and immediately they're trying to defend and second guess the next action, become completely paranoid almost, because that's what bullies do to you. They make you go into that place. How did you deal with that yourself in your own situation?
Oh, it took me a long time to learn that one. I had to learn it the hard way. But it kind of started off when you get that phone call and they're screaming at you down the phone, literally full screaming at you. I was so scared to hang up because of the potential consequences of me hanging up, because that would then result in more phone calls, more screaming, or even potentially showing up at my place of work to have a confrontation. And I was so scared of that happening that I really didn't draw that boundary for a long time. And then all of a sudden, I just started hanging up. Every time it started to get shouty and screamy, I would literally just hang up. And I wouldn't answer the phone, and I wouldn't respond to any messages. I just cut them dead.
He must have gone into shock.
Yeah, I know. And it worked, because at one point he actually said, well, there's no point me screaming at you because you just hang up on me. I went, exactly.
Because you're retraining them. You're retraining, because when any of us on whatever level, I've never, thank God, been in a situation like you've been in, but we all to some degree allow a certain amount of being bullied in our lives, but we are participating in that because we're allowing it to happen. And I guess this is when these parents work with you, maybe it's the first time anyone's ever taught them this is how you deal with bullying. And I always say this is an act of love, actually. I know you don't feel much for them at the moment because they're making your life hell. But if someone is bullying you and you allow them to continue, that's not an act of love. An act of love is to go, no, here's a boundary. This is not how we behave. And that can be fraught, sometimes dangerous for some people when they're in abusive situations. So they need to feel safe enough, at least physically and psychologically, if they're working with someone like you, that you're giving them that security there, because you can't start to put those boundaries down if you're just scared all the time of the conflict.
Yeah, and it's very much, that kind of abuse is very fear driven. So it is very much a case of what's going to happen if I hang up. What are they going to do? Oh my god, they're going to turn up at my workplace. What's going to happen then? They're going to make a big scene. I'm going to end up losing my job, and you just start to spiral into all these awful scenarios. But what you also don't see at the time is that your child is looking to you to see what happens if their relationship ends when they're a grown up.
Yes.
And you are basically role modeling for them. Well, you get shouted and screamed at, and you just take whatever they throw at you. And you basically, you just put up with it all. And is that what you want your child to grow up thinking is the right way to end a relationship? Is the
Because
right way
they
to deal with confrontation?
because they will have to end relationships, whether it's a marriage or not. We all have to learn how to do
Yeah,
that, and
yeah, absolutely.
and all we have are our role models. And if you watch too much media, you're just going to see terrible role models and ways to do it. And if that's where your parents are, and I think that's such a good point, Jenny, because the more the parent who is bullied recognises the damage, not just to themselves but to the children, that can be a negative thing in the sense that it may make them more compliant because they just think I can't do anything because I don't want the children to see us fighting. But also the way you frame it is this is about teaching the children what to do, and that isn't to sit there and be bullied. So what are the kind of I know it's like how long's a piece of string, there's so many different examples, but can you give some examples of, you've say got a dad in the home with, he's maybe doing quite a lot of the co-parenting, things are getting nasty, he doesn't want it to get to the point where she's takes the kids and starts throwing nasty lies at them. What are the kind of steps they can take when it is they recognise that it is actually a controlling and possibly abusive relationship, but they want to do something proactive?
Mm-hmm. I think it's important that first and foremost they identify the situation for what it really is, which is a power move. It's a control issue. It's a power move. And communication is normally one of the first things that breaks down. But communication is also the thing that they really need to work on to get through this, because nothing's going to be resolved unless they communicate. So they have to find a way to be able to communicate in a constructive and useful way. Now, whether that means bringing in a mediator or a marriage counsellor or somebody that's sort of a third party, that's fine. It's
or
whatever
or on
way
or
works.
I was going to say one extreme might be you're using you're not having phone calls that are that you can't validate, and your and emails. Do you really want those emails coming up amidst your work emails and making your heart sink, or on your phone? So it might be that you're using a co-parenting software and just
Yeah,
going, that's where we talk because
yeah,
everything's logged, and if it's
absolutely.
our family
I can
wizard
tell.
if it's very
I
contentious.
can tell you now. The minute that the phone pings, if it's any type of situation like I went through, their heart will just be like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! What's wrong now? What's going to happen now? You think you're trying to do the right thing by just being amenable and trying to keep the other person happy, but it's never going to last.
No.
It's never going to last, and they will continue mistreating you for as long as you allow it to happen.
And if you
So
go to court and say, I've been communicating through this specialised online app, but they are refusing to use it, but
it doesn't look
that's
great
what I
against them.
want to do because otherwise
Mhm.
there's so much conflict, and it just seems to be a much healthier way to do things.
Yeah,
No court is going to go tell not going to get anything other than what a good idea. And I've known that to happen. In fact, when one case where the judge said to the person concerned that who wasn't using the app, said, no, you're going to use that. She made a court order because they could see that this was a sensible solution for the communication of this particular couple.
even something as simple as a different phone, an old phone with a different SIM
Yeah.
card in, with a different phone number in that you can just leave switched off and just turn it on when you're ready to look at any messages, or a separate email address. I basically said, my old email address has been compromised. This is the new one from now on in.
Good one. That's a good one, actually, a really good one. So all these very practical, in
Mhm.
many cases free, simple solutions, which are potentially life-saving because
Yes.
it is a mental health trauma when
Mm.
you've got a messy divorce, and particularly around the children, when it's not just around the money. And this brings us back to the workplace. You mentioned something about being frightened that the other parent might turn up at work.
Mm.
I read somewhere, I assume it's still the case, but I don't think it's widely known, that part of a duty of care of a workplace is if you are in an abusive relationship, if you're brave enough to tell them, you say, I think this person's going to turn up. They actually have a duty of care to hire. It sounds quite extreme, but hire a security guard to stop
Mm.
that person coming in. But that, I think, is if you're under physical threat.
Yeah.
But psychologically, which is often even more pervasive in some ways,
Mm.
I don't think you've got any recourse. So it's. But if in a workplace it was a culture where these conversations could be had, where the employees could feel completely unjudged, because one of the reasons they like talking to you is that you're not judging them. You're just going,
No.
okay, you're in this situation, let's put the children first and move forwards. That if they could have that culture in a workplace where they talk about these things. And one of the things I would love to do is with you to go into workplaces and talk with the HR, with the wellbeing professionals, and directly with the staff about changing their perception about divorce, particularly when it's very, very contested, because I think too many people just assume it's about the money, but often it is actually about the children, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think when I was going through it, I didn't want to talk to my bosses about it because I was the boss. You know, I
Mm.
was the branch manager. How am I going to stand there and say, actually, I've got this ex that's like turned into a bit of a psycho and he keeps threatening to turn up in my workplace? Yay. Can we do something about that? Um, and yet you trust me with millions of your pounds.
It's tricky.
It's tricky. Yeah. So there's an ego perspective. There's a loss of face. There's a concern that you'll be considered somehow less than because you can't manage your own personal life. So there's loads of negatives and not that many positives for going forward and saying, actually, I think I need your help, um, because there isn't that reassurance that the employer will be supportive
Not
because it
at
never
all.
has been.
No.
Never
I
has
mean,
been.
I know someone who got, she worked, it was on contract for a company, and she said, I'm having really big problems. I'm getting divorced and we're having to split. And the person, the contractor said, basically stopped giving her work because they made an assumption that she wouldn't be able to do all the travelling because she'd have more childcare. There was no discussion about it. It was completely wrong as well. But and at that time, there didn't seem to be much she could do about it in that particular situation, because maybe she was an employee of a company that might have been different. But what could have been done differently for when you were in that situation so that you would have been able to go, this is happening, because we're talking about it now. We know this is not unusual, but because people
Mm.
don't talk about it, it's like all forms of abuse and all these difficult situations, it becomes a problem in itself. So what would you do if you were able to have that time again as a
Mm.
manager, a branch manager? What would you do in that
Yeah,
employee area to make sure that if someone like you had that situation, they wouldn't have to keep quiet if they didn't want to?
absolutely. I think most companies now have regular training for employees. And I think that this is an important topic that should be included within that. It's not just about sales targets and, profit and loss accounts and, hitting KPIs and all of those things. We are employing people. And if we're employing people, we not only owe them a duty of care to look out for them because they're giving a big proportion of their life to us, but we also get more out of our people if we look after them than if we don't. So if I had had the opportunity to do trainings with my employees on, okay, this might affect some people that are coming in as customers, but it also might impact on some of the staff too. So this is what domestic abuse looks like. This is what this categorizes. If we've got somebody that's on our teams that is going through this, we want to help them. We want to support them. We'll give them an opportunity to speak to somebody confidentially if needs be. Um, and just because it's not spoken about, it's considered to be. And I'm very much, nothing in my life is hidden. Everything is an open book. I'll talk about, I couldn't for a long time because it was still too painful, but I'm over that. I'm over that
Me too. Well,
now.
we've done our processing.
Absolutely. The
And we
processing
have to
is
keep
done.
doing it, because when you're working with people who are going through this situation, it flags it all up again and it triggers it all again. It's like we're suckers for punishment, really. But it becomes, because I think we both work in that place of hope and positive action and putting the children first. It's actually, I find it quite a joyful work, which is not depressing at all, even though some people's
I,
situations are
yeah,
horrendous.
yeah. I have to admit, I find it incredibly rewarding knowing that I've taken somebody who is in the deepest, darkest place and that I have actually given them the opportunity to find a new way of life and hope and a new way forward. And the reason that I can do that is because of everything I went through. Not in spite of, but
Yeah.
because I went through everything. And that has given me a unique ability to understand exactly what they're going through because I've been there. I can understand it. I can empathize. I can say, I get it. I, you know, I was there. I know exactly what you mean, but this is what you need to do because I don't, if I can just help one person to not have to go through what I went through, then I've achieved my goal.
Yeah, that's a great place to end. And lovely thing about being live, we've actually got a comment from Peter's Place to Be saying, outstanding, trust the process. Absolutely right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great way to end. So thank you so much, Jenny. And
You're welcome.
see you no doubt in the secret divorce group soon.
Absolutely. You take care. See you soon.